Joe Galli, welcome to the podcast, sir.
My pleasure. Great to be here. It's always wonderful to be able to talk to the wrestling arena. I can't imagine a better way to spend this Friday afternoon.
I really appreciate that. Your former coach was one of our first guests, and ever since then, I've had your name on the wall. So glad to have you on.
So, Coach Lamb was a great coach. He was tough as hell. I love him like my second father, and I would kill for him. But Coach Lamb was really good for me, and that's part of what helped me do what I'm doing today. So anyhow, all right, let's go.
So the first time you meet Bill Lamb, you're at the Dapper Dan. What happens at that tournament?
Well, I was going against the Ohio kid who was 56-0, and I was predicted by everyone to lose by a pin or major decision. And this kid came out and chopped me up the first period. I think he was up 7-2. He cut me twice. The second period, he's on top, and it was bad. And then all of a sudden, I have this little, I was a cradle guy. I had one move, but I'm really good at it. I had a lot of ways to get in. And so I used to set it up from the bottom and get the guy's head near his knee. And I cradled him and pinned him in the second period. So Coach Lamb was going to give this kid a scholarship. And apparently I ended up winning the scholarship in that match. Who would have known? So it was a very exciting time.
And what was it like once you actually got to be around Coach Lamb for a full season?
Terrifying.
Really?
Wow. I mean, okay. Yeah, no, he's Coach Lamb was a tough, everybody saying Dan Gable stuff. Coach Lamb pushed you to your limit, and then that's when he got started making you better. Coach Lamb expected you to win. He didn't want to hear that the other guy was ranked higher. He could have cared less. He built a team with a culture of extra work, and the whole idea is to win. And he hated to lose. I hate to lose too. People say all the time, Joe, you were so competitive. I say, thank you. Of course I'm competitive. What do you want to do? People that don't care? So yeah,
seriously.
And in my senior year, look, my sophomore year, I won some big tournaments, but I ended up taking third in ACCs, which is, you lose in the semis, it's a disaster. I lost by 1 point. So then sophomore year, I lost by 1 point in the semis. Junior year, same thing. So I'm a 3-time third place finisher, which is, and the difference between winning the tournament and taking third, everything, man. So the senior year, I finally won the damn thing, beat some guys I shouldn't have beat. We won the team, ACC team championship. And, Coach Lamb was a massive part of that for me.
And you're fast forwarding through an amazing story of how, like, the week before, the team title was going to come down to your match or something, right? And then he comes up to you beforehand, gives you the old rah-rah.
It's worse than that. First of all, the kid's ranked third in the country. Secondly, he said to me, look, Joe, I don't want to put any pressure on you, but if you don't win, we don't win the tournament. And by the way, you need to pin the guy. Now, I'm a pinner, right? So when I win, I usually pin. But he said, this is ACC finals at Duke, at Cameron Arena, where they all call UNC people bad names, right? I learned new swear words over there. So anyhow, I did pin the bastard in the first period. And, it was an exciting step for me. It was a good time. Look, we had a great team. I was not the best wrestler on the team. I was a leader. I was a captain. I spent a lot of time in the books and all that stuff. I had other things going on, but the wrestling mattered a lot to me. And when some of the better guys had some misfortune, it was really exciting for me to be able to step up and do it.
Yeah. Who were some of the guys on your team who were some?
I won the tournament. The 3 guys that won were Dave Cook, the NCAA runner-up, Jan Michaels, 3-time All-American, and me. So Carter Mario's the best wrestler I've ever seen, and one of my close friends, who's never won the NCAAs. He's the last guy to beat Schultz. Carter's the last guy to beat Schultz. He beat him 14-12 in the NCAAs the year before. And Carter lost in the semis to a kid named Reese from NC State, who was a freshman. And this kid beats Carter in the semis and went all the way and won the NCAA title. So, that was crazy. And then we had C.D. Mock, of course, was our first national champ.
Mm-hmm.
Bobby Monahan, third in the country, beat Weaver. He beat Gable's guy. So the team was loaded, man.
And how long had it been since Coach Lamb had gotten there and turned UNC around?
Well, he was there 2 years before I got there, and it was his first team was probably 0-46. And let's see. So I started in 76. And I came along with Carter Mario, and C.D. Mock came the next year with Cook and Monahan. in 77 and 78, we lost the ACC. We were, I don't know, runner up, second, maybe third in ACC. But my junior year, Wade Chalice was coaching Clemson, and we had the tournament at Clemson. My junior year, I didn't win, but the team won. My senior year, the team won. So Coach took what it was 4 years to go from last place to ACC champ. And that ACC tournament, everybody says, it was a lot easier back then. That's bullshit. Back then, we had 3 national champs. The year I won the ACCs, wow. 3 of those winners went on to win the national. So it was not an easy conference. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's legit. I didn't know what the
Rob Cole was an amazing wrestler and a close friend. Don't forget TJ Jaworski, 3-time NCAA champ.
Yeah.
W. Island, a famous surgeon, he was runner-up. We've had, look, we're better than people might perceive. That's for sure. Well,
and they went from, like you said, a program on the edge of oblivion, and they hosted the national tournament. And they
Coach Lamb's, you want to know what Coach Lamb was like? He had the courage. Machiavelli always said, "Fortune favors the bold," right? So Coach Lamb, in I think it was '92, they built the Dean Dome down there, right? And he had a killer team, and he convinced everybody to host. This is a basketball school, right? He convinced everybody to host a national title, and I think UNC finished 5th that year, maybe 4th. So it was an amazing achievement.
And that's when Pat Smith won the 4th. So it was big nationals.
Big. And Ryan, let's face it, every year's a big national.
True.
Have you ever been to a nationals that's not big? I think they're all great.
Everyone
of talent, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, everyone though, you're sad because all your friends are gone the next day. You're just like, man, I wish I could get back there. It's crazy. Yeah. Well, it's cool to read that. So you grew up in PA in the Whippeal, and somehow you get linked up in a Bobby Douglas camp. What was he living out there at the time?
No. All right, so Bobby Douglas, he wrote books before there was the internet, right? He wrote these books on technique. My mother bought them all, made me read them, memorize them. So anyhow, Bobby, before he took over Arizona State, he started a club in Pittsburgh. Now, today there's 10 million clubs, right? Everybody's got a club. But back then, there weren't many. And he started a club called the Making of a Champion. And it was in the Pittsburgh Golden Triangle YMCA, downtown Pittsburgh. Franco Harris used to lift weights 1 floor below the wrestling room. And he'd come and watch us wrestle. And Bobby, back then it was like a crazy thing. Wait, I went to practice at 4. Why would I go practice again at 6?
Right.
So there was a band. We had a small band of maniacs that wanted to win, and Bobby was he ran the camp. He ran this, not a camp. It's a club, a wrestling club. I learned more from him in the first hour than my high school coaches taught me in 6 years. So he was a brilliant technician. So anyhow, yeah, that's how I hooked up with Bobby, and that helped me a lot. So yeah, that's when I was a sophomore in high school.
Man, and that's like you said, back then clubs were like, you just had to get lucky enough to live next to a good coach, otherwise you were on your own.
Well, don't forget though, the WPIAL is the toughest conference in the country. I don't care what anybody says. And Pittsburgh is the center of the universe for youth and high school wrestling. And still, it's okay. There's more states that are better now, but we were always really good at this. So in Pittsburgh, you didn't really need. Most of the technique in Pittsburgh back then, it wasn't the brilliant technician. It was I went to Valley High School. So 4 miles away is Catani, where Jason Off went. 1 mile is Burl, who produces one stud after another. Then Kiski is 3 miles. I mean, my section. Then I had Franklin Regional, 8 miles. Spencer Lee, et cetera. So to win my section before you qualify for the next round, before you even go to Whippeal, you've got like 5 monsters. So if you survive that, you got really good.
Wow.
Now, I wasn't as talented as these other guys in terms of athleticism, but I'm very strategic. I'm smart, and I wrestled like a physical chess player. So thank God.
And is that I read in I think it was a Wall Street Journal article on you that you would run after every loss? Was that them? Is that true?
Well,
or
no? Okay, so first of all, I didn't lose that much, so it wasn't that it wasn't as impressive. But I did lose. And Pittsburgh is cold and icy and snowy in the winter, and you get back from a loss, and it's 10:45, and I just got dressed and put the rubber suit on, and I had a 7-mile run. And when I lost, I always ran my best times because I was so freaking furious about it. Now I don't today, you wouldn't go on a 7-mile run. You would probably work on technique or work on, but back then, we all ran, and I ran more than the other guy usually. So yeah, that's what I would do. In college, I did some of the same stuff. If I lost, first of all, if you lost for Coach Lamb, you didn't want to face him. And so, I mean, the worst thing about losing was having to look at him and then hearing the little comment after the match, which was devastating. So I tried to sneak out and go in the weight room or something. But
so there was none of this good effort out there back during Coach Lamb's there.
The only good effort is if you win. I mean, you got to understand, right? The difference between winning and losing is everything. Everything. What's the point? Why even bother if you're not going to try to win? Right? So no, there was none of that. And it was good for me. It's helped me in business a lot. I think in business, you either make your number or you don't.
Yeah.
If I have a global president that's missing her number, I don't say, well, Mildred, the economy is tough. And how's your family? But the important thing is you're enjoying this. That's bullshit, man. See, you better make the fucking number. There's no alternative here, right?
There's no other way.
So it's just like, that's what Coach Lamb was. You felt like there was no choice about winning or losing. You better figure out how to win. It didn't matter if the other guy was a lot better than you. It didn't matter. And
it's like, it's funny you say that because at my day job, I'm in tech sales. And
awesome.
Yeah. So, September's the end of our fiscal year, so we'll come down to the wire. And like you said, the numbers are everything.
Yeah.
And it's because you've wrestled, that's easier to handle. And I know you got a lot of lessons, so not only from Coach Lamb and from all these war stories, but also your dad ran a salvage yard. And I want to understand, what'd you learn from your pops?
Well, I learned everything from him. He made it. So my father's father, my grandfather, died at the age of 35 in a coal mine crash. So my dad was born in Harlem. They moved to Pittsburgh. My grandfather bought all this coal mine space, died. So dad had to drop out of 8th grade and lie about his age, work in a steel mill, then lied about his age, go to the Navy. Then he came back and so they had no money. So dad figured out, he took the coal mine land, which is worthless, and he said, I'll put a scrapyard on top. And when he bought a press, like Goldfinger, when they squished the car up,
dad
had the first one in Pittsburgh because he didn't have to excavate. They just placed it right down in the high end of the mine. And I mean, so he was brilliant about that. He scrapped 10 cars a day, 5 days a week for 50 years. Can you imagine? And I watched this from my window at the house. So my father taught me, this is the best illustration of my father. So I was promoted 21 times in 19 years at Black & Decker. I went from entry-level sales rep to global president. And I was the youngest in that position in the Fortune 500 at the time. And so my dad took every business card I had and put it up. He had this Joe Galli in scrapyard to honor my achievements. But then with all my business cards and all these other letters of how great I am and all this stuff, he takes a picture from the Raleigh News and Observer from my sophomore year. And there's a kid named Dave Polsinelli, another Italian from Pittsburgh, or another Italian from Pennsylvania. And this is an NC State kid. That's the kid that beat me in the semis. And so the picture in the News Observer was like half a page. And it's Polsinelli pile driving me into the mat. It's the most humiliating possible. So dad puts it up. And, I finally said, Dad, I can give you 10,000 pictures of me winning. Why is this here? And he said, because you need to understand, right next to your all these promotions, there's always somebody better. And this is my father, man. This is my father. So yeah, I learned a lot. I would work out hard. I had a few friends in Pittsburgh, and we were all maniacs. So we go lift weights at the YMCA at 7. I'd go down the scrapyard at 10. And if you ever worked in a scrapyard in the summer, you have to remember the ground is black from all the oil they were in. The cars are sitting out in the sun. So if it's 74 degrees, it's 110, and it's humid. And so it's like a sauna, right? And so Dad, I would come back lifting weights, exhausted, right? And I said, Dad, so I worked for him for 6 hours a day. I said, what are we doing today? He said, well, I want you to move the drive shafts from the far end of the scrapyard up front. And I said, well, Dad, I just moved them from there to the back 3 weeks ago. He said, I didn't ask for any input. Just move the damn driver shafts. So you carry 612 of these, all day. And, the weightlifting was nothing compared to the scrapyard work. So, yeah, he was, and my dad, made it to 8th grade, smart as hell. Brilliant, actually. Read every newspaper get his hands on, watched every historical documentary. He was a national champ level bocce player, the Italian game.
Wow.
He won a lot of money playing that stuff. So he was competitive as hell too. But anyhow, yeah, I was very fortunate to have a great father, and Coach Lamb, which I consider my second father. How can I not succeed with all this mentorship, right?
And we cannot forget about the guy I've been dying to ask you about, Mr. Pudwell, is it?
Oh, well, so Horst Pudwell is the chairman founder of TTI. He's a brilliant, innovative entrepreneur. Started a company. His son Stefan is the vice chairman. So I met Horst in 1992 in a restaurant called Labita in Cologne, Germany. We used to have this thing called a Cologne Fair where we display all these tools. You have it in tech. So anyhow, I go in a restaurant around 10 at night with my coterie, my entourage, and I see him over there, and I've heard about this guy because he was taking all this market share and so I went up to him. And I said, Horst, my name's Joe Galli. I just thought it was appropriate that I introduced myself. I said, by the way, will you leave me some business? Because you're taking it all. And he said, sit down. So we stayed up till 4 a.m. that first night. And, the rest is history, right? He and I were always close. He hired me in 2006. And we've taken this company from 1 billion in sales to 14 billion. The stock was $1.56. Now, we're about 95 now. Yeah, and we're just getting started. What we're going to do the next 10 years, we will disrupt and shock the industry, and we will be one of the great companies in the world. And
I love how excited you are about it still, though.
Oh, I haven't even gotten started. Look, Ryan, all I've done in 16 years is build a foundation, man. Everybody's congratulating me. I say, why? It's like, I just did the warm-ups. Now let's go wrestle, baby. So what we have now is a launching pad for massive, unassailable leadership competitive advantage positions. It's in every so we focus I was accused 10 years ago of only focusing on cordless, right? Cordless lawnmowers, cordless power tools, cordless vacuum. So back then 80% of the market was either gas or corded or pneumatic or hydraulic. Today, well, in 3 years it'll be 90% cordless. And guess what? We're number one in the only thing that matters. We are Apple. We only do iPhone. Our competitors are still doing payphones, carrier pigeons, fax machines. I mean, you got to. So what we've done now is put a platform in place, and get ready, man, because we're gonna have a lot of fun in the next 10 years, no question.
Man, I'm so excited to watch. And just like last time, we skipped over all the good stuff. I got to go back to this one.
Yeah.
June 1999. You got Pepsi on the phone. You got Amazon on the phone.
Yeah.
Tell me about, you end up going with Amazon as the president of Amazon. Yeah. Tell me about that experience. That's crazy.
Well, first of all, I wasn't on the phone. I was in Purchase, New York. I mean, the Pepsi guys hate my guts, but anyhow, I was in Purchase, New York. I just said I can't make in the end, I didn't want to make little kids fat. I'm sorry. I'm a freak about so Pepsi was one of the most prestigious jobs in the world. Still is. But I was in New York, and Pepsi was delaying the announcement. They had hired me, and they said, well, we got to wait another while, and I felt like it would leak and it was gonna be uncomfortable. And then they found out Amazon wouldn't stop, so they leaked the story to the Journal. And then all of a sudden, Jeff flew to New York and sat down and created. He made me an offer I couldn't refuse, and I didn't do it for the money. I didn't do it for anything. But I just thought, why do I want to go backwards? Why do I want a company that's not an innovative company, not on the vanguard? So Amazon, when Jeff and I talked about the future, my God, we got us both worked into a frenzy. And so everybody congratulated Jeff when he hired me, said, hey, thank God you hired Joe. He's the adult. He'll keep you. Jeff said, what? Joe's not an adult. Joe's going to pour gasoline on the fire. I learned from Jeff and Amazon how to be bold, how to go on the attack. I learned how big to think.
Yeah.
It was a unique PhD in winning massively in business.
Man, I can't, it's just, That's like right before maybe the .com bubble's happening.
No, the bubble was look, yeah, the bubble happened. I lived through it, but there's no look when you worry about okay, if you have 100 companies that all of a sudden get very valuable, something's wrong. But Amazon always had a path to global leadership, so there was never a bubble at Amazon. All they do is keep winning, right? There's no bubble. So, but there were all the Mickey Mouse stuff is gone. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's I mean, the ones that made it through are still here. Salesforce made it through,
well, not Salesforce is spectacular, right? But yeah, a lot of eBay made it through. We got to love Microsoft, right?
Yeah.
How about Google? So a lot of them make it through.
And I got to imagine you're someone when you're on like you are now, you're waking up freaking early, you're going all day, like just working like a maniac. Yeah. The year between Newell Rubbermaid and your current role, what was that like for you when you were on?
Actually, the first week was miserable, and then it was unbelievably good. So I focused on, I focused on my family. I focused on getting in shape, like really getting in shape. I focused on, I love. So I'm a coin collector. My dad made me collect coins when the scrap records. We found them in the cars. So now we call a coin collector a numismatist. But I focused and made a lot of money in that hobby. And I read every book I could get my hands on, and it was the best it was the best preparation. So when I left Black & Decker DeWalt and I went to Amazon, I had no transition time. I went from tools to books and everything else. And then it was the same thing, when I went to Newell Rubbermaid. So this was a good thing for me. I didn't plan it that way, but it turned out, as I look back 16 years ago, it turned out to be great.
Wow. Yeah, it's like in the moment, it's probably the worst thing, but then looking back, maybe a big turning point.
And everybody said, "What'd you learn from wrestling?" And I tell the story 1,000 times. So I learned from wrestling. You enter a tournament and there's 75 kids. There's only one guy that's going to win, and other than Kale, tell me what wrestler has never lost a match, right?
Right.
And Kyle lost. So you learn how to deal with defeat. You learn how to deal with a setback. And I was not Kyle, so I, and in losing in Reynolds Coliseum over NC State in front of those fans, this is not a pleasant thing. But in business, when I've had a setbacks, I actually from wrestling learned how to deal with it. And today I look back and say, those who don't have a setback will never be as good. They'll never achieve their full potential, because that when you're in a deep valley and you're feeling sorry for yourself, man, that's when you really figure out how to go even harder and better and achieve your goals, right? So the setbacks have been miserable experiences and incredibly good for me.
Yeah, man. Thank you for sharing that. I want to, a little bit of me wants to go back to when you first got into business. What was your first role? Were you just calling on sales?
I was a sales rep calling on hardware stores in North Carolina, South Carolina, and there was a 4-store chain that just started in Atlanta called the Home Depot. So I called on little bitty independent stores, and I called on who is now the biggest tool seller in the world, but they only had 4 stores then. Now they have 2,200. So that was my role as sales rep. I was in that job a year. And then, like I said, I was promoted 21 times in 19 years. And I went through all kind of product development jobs and marketing jobs and ended up running the US, then North America, then the world.
For some sales folks listening, and we do have a few, that first year, what was key? Was it just being out in front of your customers every day? I mean, what were you doing that no one else was?
Well, so some of this will sound maybe arrogant, but these are good stories. I was the best sales rep at Black & Decker, and nobody was even close. I was trained by 2 experts in Charlotte, North Carolina. We were in a suite, and they were there to train me on the tools and on the selling technique. And before I started, I had a month between UNC and Black & Decker, so I memorized the catalog. 600 pages, and I memorized everything. I have a good memory. And so when I walked in, and my dad knows more about tools than the guys running tool companies. So I walked in the door, and these guys are saying, "Well, Joe, this is a cordless drill." I said, "Well, that's a 9027, but the problem is it only has 4 cells." He said, "Well, how do you know that?" Well, guys, it's in the catalog. Plus, I talked to some. So then after 10 minutes of this, they said, "There's not anything we're going to teach you. Why don't you take over and teach us about the product line?" Which is what I did with my bosses. So then it's been 3 days. So anyhow, the moral of that story, if you're in sales, you better know the fucking product line backwards and forwards, man. If you don't have a chance. you better know more than anybody else you're talking to about what you're selling. And well, first step is you better sell something that's really good, because trying to overpromise is a bad idea.
Yeah.
Okay, so then 3 days, Ryan, at the end of 3 days, my boss and his boss say, okay, Joe, look, you're good at product, but you never have done any sales. Meantime, I've been selling to my dad's scrapyard since I was 4, right? You know, you buy the car for $5, you sell the fender for 200. I mean, you know, I watch my dad do this every day, right? So anyhow, they say, whatever you do, you don't call on any of your customers yet until the formal training next week in Atlanta. Now, this was a Friday afternoon, you know, 4 o'clock. And I said, well, why, guys? They said, because you don't know the process. It's 10 steps. You walk in, you do this step, check the box. Yeah. So I said, well, okay. So anyhow, they left for the airport, and I went right to the first hardware store I could find. And I went in and I introduced myself, and anyhow, I wrote a big order. I didn't know the steps. And then I called the, you know, back then we had payphones, right? I called a big shot on my payphone, and I said, hey, look, I have to sort of admit something. He said, what happened? I said, well, you know, I made a sales call. He said, God damn it, I told you not to make up. You don't know how. Did you humiliate yourself in the company? I said, well, actually, I wrote $10,000 order. And he said, you what? I said, yeah, I wrote an order. He said, how'd you do that? You don't know how. But guys, I just talked to the guy and I sold him, you know, what he needed. So, you know, and from there, my sales career took off. You know, selling was, for me, it was a blast. You walk in a hardware store, you're the Black & Decker person. You know, back then we wore a suit and tie, even in a miserable little hardware store. But I always liked going in. I felt like a celebrity.
You were nervous walking in?
Never. I was never. No. Let me tell you something. You wrestle in the NCAAs against Leroy Smith and get your ass kicked in front of 10,000 people. What would ever make me nervous from now on? How could that happen to me? What, some clerk in Goldsboro, North Carolina, is going to call me names or call, you know, that? No, I haven't been nervous. I've never been nervous like wrestling. You know, that's why people say, Joe, you go into these board meetings. You know, most CEOs have a massive fear of public speaking. That's why they use teleprompters. And they're also, they have a massive fear of conflict, some other things. So, but you know, I go in a board meeting and, you know, I live for this, man. I can't wait. You know, nervous. I see other guys, they're sweating, and I love it, because I know more than everybody else in the room, and I am incredibly passionate. If I make a mistake, I admit it and fix it, right? So why would I be nervous? Wow. But most CEOs do get nervous. So we can thank wrestling for that.
Let me ask you about this though. Watching your sons wrestle, where do you stand on that one? Nervous?
I'm the worst father in history. You know, watching Peter, when my kids wrestle, I'm nervous wreck. In fact, that's the only time I've been nervous. I'm so nervous in the pigtail before the quarterfinals. I'm like, oh my God. And, you know, I used to sit down by the mat, and the coaches, you know, and I would, it's funny, you know, I would just take over the match. I'd trash talk the ref, yell at the kids. And the coach is funny. Yeah, you need to sit in the top of the arena and don't say another word, because it's embarrassing for us. And so I go up, and when I got mad, or Alexander, well, how could that happen? That takedown. I was just going to men's room and kick the trash can. I was I was a very committed wrestling father, but I was not good in terms of controlling my emotions.
Man.
Yeah, but anyhow, look, you know, I brag about my kids. I'm incredibly fortunate. I have great kids, and yeah, I always wanted to win.
I love it. Well, Mr. Galli, you're been very generous with your time. I got one more question for you, and then we'll sign off, sir. You know, I've noticed a couple phrases you say consistently over time, different earnings calls. It's like, you know, the one that I love though is focus on what you can control. And this came out big when you got COVID coming out. You got Home Depot closing all their stores. What the heck's going to happen?
Yeah. So here, Ryan, I'm glad you brought it up. Okay. So, I believe that, first of all, the macroeconomic issues we're facing today are a fiasco. I've never seen anything so bad. However, these things don't discriminate. First of all my competitors have the same issues. And however, there's nothing I can do about it. I can't tell. You know, Biden stopped calling me 3 months ago because I yell at him all the time. So I can't control what the president does, what Vladimir does in Ukraine. What I can control is what my company does. So, and I don't want my people to tell me they missed their number because it rained too much in Northern Idaho. I don't want to hear these, or ocean freight. I can give you 100 excuses right now that I've heard CEOs talk about in the last week. So anyhow, we don't make excuses. Excuses are for other people. I want to build a company that flourishes in good times and bad. I don't care what the economy does. Steve Jobs never cared when he launched iPhone and iPad. He never cared what the economy didn't matter. He changed the world. So yeah, we focus on things we can control. And by the way, there's a lot of things we can control. Like we control everything with the macro. We control who we hire, what is our strategy, how we work with all that stuff. So yeah, I am.
And do you have like a set routine in the morning you do every day to
What's
control?
that?
Do you have like a set routine you do every morning to control how you start the day?
Well, it's hard because I was traveling 270 days a year for a while. Then the virus hit. When the virus hit, I actually got into a set routine with my wife. We would get up at 6 and work out every morning, and then I'd do Zoom calls, and then I take a break and read a book or do something else in the afternoon. So I got a little bit set. But now, when I can, I get up early and work out when I can. But if I don't work out in the morning, there's nothing wrong with working out at night. So
right,
you can do it right. A CEO can't have a set schedule, right? Because if something happens at 10:30, what am I going to do? Go to the update meeting at 11? Are you kidding me? I cancel everything. We work on what matters. So, and I feel like the philosophy about being good in business leadership is focused on impact versus activity. It doesn't matter how many meetings I go to. It doesn't matter how many conferences. All that matters is what impact am I having as a leader? And the only way to tell impact is results, right? So
yeah,
it takes too much time on what I call non-value added activity, wasting time, reports, meetings, trips. So if you can't look back, this is a good way to close our session. If you can't look back every 6 months and say, here are the 1 or 2 achievements that there were breakthrough achievements for me that I'm really proud of. If you can't do that, then you're working on the wrong stuff. It doesn't matter how many hours you work. It matters what you get done with those hours. So that's called impact versus activity.
Awesome.
You learn wrestling too, man.
That's it. Joe, thanks for your time. It's been a lot of fun.
All right, guys. All right. Thanks, Ryan.